everyone. I am Swati from Janki Devi Memorial College. Today, our lecture is on the topic of microeconomics, the market forces of demand and supply. So, for today's lecture, I am going to focus on the demand aspect of the market. So, to begin with, what is a market? A market is a place where buyers and sellers of a particular good meet, and when they meet, they come up with buyers come up with the demand of the product and sellers supply the product. So there is a market for a particular good. There are two parties. One is the buyer, one is the seller, and they want to trade in a particular commodity or service. When buyers come together, they determine the demand for the product, and the sellers come together, they determine the supply of the product. So, supply and demand are the words that we often hear in economics, and together they interact with one another in competitive market to bring on a price of a product. Now, what is a competitive market? Market in which there are many buyers and many sellers is a market which is competitive because there are many buyers and there are many sellers. And because there are so many sellers and there are so many buyers, that the impact on the market price of a single seller and a single buyer is negligible. So one seller cannot make any difference in the market because there are too many sellers and there are too many buyers, and the prices are and the quantity are determined by buyers and sellers when they interact in a marketplace. So, what is a perfectly competitive market? Again, we have already done what is a competitive market. When there is a perfectly competitive market, so the good that is offered for sale are exactly the same. So, there are many sellers in the market, and the seller that is selling the product by each seller is the same. So, the good offered for sale are exactly the same. So, and the buyers and sellers are so numerous that one seller or one buyer cannot influence the market price, and therefore when the market price is determined by the market, then the seller and the buyer become price taker. They are not the price maker because they cannot determine the price. The markets together determine the price. At that price, the price will be determined by the market. At that price, the buyers can buy all that they want and the sellers can sell all that they want. The price is set. Next market that could be there is monopoly. The monopoly is a market where there is only one seller, and because there is only one seller, so he sets his own price. He becomes the price maker and he sets the price. And then between these two extremes, there are markets which are perfect competition and monopoly, and between them there are many other markets which we are not going into detail as for this lecture is concerned. So then we come to our main topic of demand. So what is demand? The first topic that we want to focus on is on the law of demand. For getting to know about the law of demand, we focus on what is quantity demanded. The quantity demanded is the amount that the buyers are willing and able to purchase. So the total demand that the buyers are willing and able to purchase at a particular price is the quantity that will be demanded of a product. So the law of demand states that everything else equal, other things remain the same. When the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded of the good falls, and vice versa. So when a price of there is a particular product, and for that particular product, if the price is rising, then the quantity demanded would go down, and if the price is falling, then the quantity demanded would rise. And this is a law of demand, that price and quantity demanded are inversely proportional to each other, uh, keeping other things equal. So then we come to demand schedule. So the relationship between different prices and different amount of quantity that will be demanded, when we get a relationship from this, that is called demand schedule. the table that this schedule, when we draw it in the form of table, which we'll do in a while, is called demand schedule, and when we draw it on the graph, then it is called demand curve. And for calculating the demand curve, price is taken on the vertical axis and quantity is taken on the horizontal axis. Now let's look at this demand schedule. So there is we have on the first, in the first column we have price of ice cream. So when the price of ice cream, as you can see, when the price of ice cream is 0, then Catherine is demanding 12. When the price of the ice cream becomes 0.5, then Catherine is demanding 10. When the price is 1, then she's demanding 8. So as the price of ice cream is increasing, the the demand for ice cream for Catherine is reducing. This relationship in the table format is called demand schedule. There is another buyer, Nicholas, and the same is happening for Nicholas in the relationship side, that if the price of ice cream is increasing, then he is going to demand lesser. But the how much less and how much he was initially demanding and how much less he is going to demand because of the increase in price, that can vary among different consumers, but the relationship always remains inverse, that the price and quantity demanded are going to be negatively related to each other. So this is called individual demands. For Catherine, this is the individual demand, and for Nicholas, this is the individual demand. How do we come at the market demand? So we assume that there are only two people in the market. This is an assumption, and for making our lives easy, we assume that there are only two people in the market, and when we add the quantity that is demanded by both of them at a particular price, that becomes market demand curve. For example, at $1, Catherine is demanding 8, Nicholas is demanding 5. So the total market demand is 8 plus 5, which is 13. And every number that you see on the market has come by adding the demand of Catherine and Nicholas. For the first, 12 plus 7, 19. The second, at $0.5, 10 plus 6, 16. So as you can see, the rule remains the same. As the price of ice cream is increasing, the market demand curve is also reducing. These are also negatively related. So the quantity demanded is in the market is the sum of quantities demanded by individual buyers at each price. Thus, market demand curve is found by horizontally adding the individual demand curve. For example, at a price of $2, the Catherine is demanding 4 ice cream cones and Nicholas is demanding 3 ice cream cones, and therefore the market demand is 7 cones at uh, a price of $2. Now, what is a demand uh, graph? So, demand graph, as you can see, for individual, for Catherine, when we draw the table, the first for Catherine, we take the price of ice cream and the quantity demanded by Catherine, and we draw this on a graph that is called demand curve of Catherine. So Catherine's demand is at 2, she's demanding 4. At 1.5, she's demanding 6, and which is how we come at the demand of Catherine. Similarly, we do the same for Nicholas. At $2, he's demanding an ice cream, and the amount is quantity of ice cream that he demands is 3. And when we add them together, then it becomes the market demand curve. For example, when we add at 2, how much both of them are demanding. So at 2, they are both are demanding a total of 7. So 4 plus 3, 7, and we do it for every price of the ice cream. And therefore, and the rule remains the same, that the law of demand says that the quantity demanded and the price of a good are negatively related to each other. And when the price is rising, therefore that means that when the price is rising, the quantity demanded is falling, and when the price is falling, then the quantity demanded would increase. Now we come to the next topic, what causes change in demand. One change could be shifts in demand curve. So if fact there is a demand curve, but if now things change, we have also the law of demand curve also states that other things remaining constant. What if other things change? So one change that could happen, that would cause shifts in demand curve. Shifts in demand curve means when the demand curve shifts to the right or demand curve shifts to the left. So the reasons could be multiple. The first reason is so the increase in demand. Any change that increases the quantity demanded at every price, that is called an increase in demand, and that would cause demand curve to shift to right. And when at any price the quantity demanded decreasing at every price, then that is called decrease in demand, and that causes leftward shift in demand. So first is we have a demand curve D1. When there is, for due to multiple reason which we'll come down to, for any reason, if at every price the quantity demanded increases, then it is called an increase in demand, and that causes the shift in demand. That means from blue line the curve demand curve goes to D2, which is an increase in demand, there is a shift. Or what can happen is from D1 the demand can decrease and there can be a leftward shift in the demand curve, that is called decrease in demand. Any change that raises the quantity that buyers are willing to purchase at a given price shifts the demand curve to right, and that is called increase in demand. Any change that lowers the quantity that buyers wish to purchase at any given price shifts the demand curve to the left. Now, what are these variables that could shift the demand curve? So the first, so there are many reasons. Uh, One is income, price of related goods, taste, preferences, expectations, number of buyers. We come to the first reason, income. So what if the income of a consumer increases? So we first have to figure out that if the income of a consumer increases or decreases, then there are the effect on the demand would be different for different types of goods. So there are two types of goods. First is the normal good, and the second type of goods are the inferior goods. Normal goods are those goods for whom other things, when they are constant, an increase in the income leads to an increase in demand. So when consumers income increases and there is a good that is normal for him, so because of the increase in income, even though the prices have not changed for that product, but because the consumer's income has changed, his demand will change. And if this good is a normal good for him, then he will increase his demand. He's going to consume more of this good. There can be some goods which are inferior, and if the good that we are talking about is an inferior good and his income increases, then that income increase, the price of the good has not changed, but his income has increased. And because the income has increased and the good that we are talking about here is an inferior good, then he will want to reduce his demand for this good, and there will be a leftward shift in the demand curve, and that is called decrease in demand. Can you think of an example of a normal good or an inferior good? So, for example, when I want to eat something and I want to have an ice cream which is expensive, but because I cannot have, because if I'm a student and I cannot afford that ice cream, I will buy another good. But if my income increase, then if the good that I really like, I will spend more on that because my income has increased, so I will consume more of that good. And if a particular ice cream which is very cheap and I was consuming it because I liked ice cream and I could not afford a good quality ice cream, then the demand for the this cheaper ice cream would decrease because of my increase in demand. So it is not necessary that if the demand of a consumer, if the income of the consumer increase, then he is going to demand more of every good. He's only going to demand more of the good which is normal for him. He will not, in fact, he will reduce his demand for an inferior good. Next reason for shift in demand curve, is price of related goods. Now there are the related goods are of two types. One is substitute goods, the second is complementary goods. What are substitute goods? We are talking about two goods here. The substitute goods are the goods that are going to be that could be exchanged for each other. For example, I don't have a particular liking of tea and coffee. I'll be okay with both of them, and I'm these are exchangeable, so these are substitutes of each other. So when the price of one good changes and the demand of other good also changes, and those goods could be substitute or they could be complementary, and complementary goods are the goods that go with each other. So substitute goods are the goods that could be used in place of each other, so either or. And complementary goods are and. So I want to have tea and I want to have 2 spoons of sugar. So these are complementary for me because I like it that way. So these are also two goods. Now what happens to the demand of one good when the price of the other good changes? So when an increase in price of one good leads to an increase in demand of other good, then those goods are substitutes. So for an example, if I don't have a particular preference of, let's say, Coke and Pepsi, so I want to see what is happening to the demand of Pepsi. Now let's say the price of Pepsi has not changed, but the price of Coke has increased. So because Pepsi and Coke are substitutes of each other, and price of Coke has increased, so I would reduce the demand of Coke because now it is expensive, its price is higher. I would reduce the quantity that I demand of Coke, and I would increase my demand for Pepsi because it is now relatively cheaper because Coke is becoming expensive, the price has increased. So an increase in price of one goods leads to a demand increase in demand of the other goods. Those goods are called substitute goods. The next type of goods are complementary goods, and these are the opposite. They go with each other. So for example, I want to have tea and sugar together, and if price of sugar increases, then my total experience of having tea would increase because I need to have sugar also when I have tea. So when price of sugar increases, then I will reduce my demand for sugar, and I put that sugar in my tea, and that tea's demand would also go down because I will not drink tea when I don't have the sugar enough. So an increase in price of one goods leads to a decrease in price of other goods. Those goods are called complementary goods, and you can see that increase would lead to a rightward shift. Increase in demand means a rightward shift, and a decrease in demand would lead to a leftward shift. Next reason for the shift in demands could be taste. If the taste change in favor of a good, demand increases and there is a rightward shift. For example, if everyone starts to like iPhone now, so the demand, the taste, people are preferring it more, they are liking this product more. So the demand would increase. The prices have not changed. They have the sellers have not reduced the prices, but people are preferring it. People want to have it more now, so now that means the price remains the same, but there will be a rightward shift because the demand has increased. Similarly, if for a particular demand for a particular good there is no demand because people are don't like that good enough now, so that means taste have gone unfavorable for this good, and there will be a decrease in demand, the leftward shift in demand. Next reason for the shift in demand is expectation about future. So what is the consumer expecting? So for example, if a consumer is expecting that his income is going to increase in the future, so he will start to splurge more, that he knows that money is coming for him. So if there is an expectation of an increase in income, he will start to increase his demand for a normal good now, because he knows that income is coming, I can splurge much more, I can demand much more, I can consume much more. And if there is a demand for higher price, then also there will be increase in demand. Now if I know that tomatoes are going to be becoming expensive in a month, then I will start to consume tomatoes more right now, because I know that in the future when the price actually rise, I'm going to reduce the demand of it. So right now let me have it much more, because it is cheaper now relatively, and it is becoming my expectation is that the price will become higher, so I will increase the demand of that particular good now. The next reason for a shift in demand could be the number of buyers. If the number of buyers increase, so this again comes down to taste. If people are demanding much or more of this good and the number of buyers increase, market demand will increase. And if the number of buyers decrease, the market demand will decrease. Increase means a rightward shift, decrease means a leftward shift in the demand curve. Now next is the movement along the demand curve. So one, we had studied about the shift in demand curve and the various reasons that could cause a shift in demand curve. The next is movement in demand curve. So in this figure you can see that there is a movement. The demand curve is not shifting, d1 remains d1, but there is a movement along the demand curve. On the same demand curve from A, the quantity demanded is changing to from A 20 20. In this example, this good X, on X axis there are cigarettes, and on the Y axis there is price. From A, which is 20 packets of 20 cigarettes, to 12 cigarettes. So that means when there is a movement along the demand curve, the reason for this movement is only one. So there are not multiple reasons. When the price of good itself changes, so the law of demand says when the good has become expensive, you would want to reduce the quantity, and when the good is cheaper, you want to increase the quantity, and that would, the change in price would cause movement along the demand curve, which is happening in this example. In this example, earlier the consumer was at A. The price of cigarettes were $4 and he was consuming 20 cigarettes. Now, if the price rises to $8, then law of demand says, other things remaining constant, price increase, he has to reduce his number of cigarettes from 20, he has reduced to 12, and that causes a change in demand, and that change now is called movement along the demand curve, because the reason is the change in price. Now we come to the end of this class, and I want to draw your attention that there is in the demand curve there is a difference in shift and movement of demand curve. Movement in demand curve happens only with one reason, and that reason is when the price of good changes, then there will be movement along the demand curve. For example, if price of potato increases, the demand of potato will decrease, other things remaining constant, and vice versa also. When price of potato decreases, the demand of potato would increase, other things remaining constant, and this is called movement in demand curve, movement along the demand curve. So demand curve does not, it remains the same. The next change in demand is the shift in demand, and shift in demand happens for any other factor that could affect the demand of that good other than price. So demand can change because of many reasons. Price is one reason, income is one reason, taste is one reason, preferences, number of buyers, what we had discussed. So these are multiple reasons. So every reason that could change the demand other than the price change is called shift in demand. If there is the demand increases, that is called rightward shift in demand, increase in demand, and if the demand decreases, that would be called decrease in demand, and it will cause leftward shift in the demand curve. So thank you, and I'll meet you for the next class. Thank you.